Welcome once again to Cinemaholics from the Bay Area, California. I am John Agroni, editor-in-chief of Cinemaholics. From Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he is a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend, and he also reviews films for Cinemaholics, and he's just getting off that Sundance bender. It is Will Ashton.
Yeah, I was going to say, we just marathoned how many movies, and now we got a few more that we got to talk about, but I'm happy to be here nonetheless.
It never ends, but that's why we do this every week, because we just appreciate the business, and we are covering a lot of films this week.
Yeah,
between the two of us. I was almost said three of us. I miss Abby Olchesi so much. She couldn't make it this week, so it's just the boys. The boys are back in town.
Yeah, just the boys. Oh well.
Yeah.
Hopefully next week it's a reunion. It's been too long, but unfortunately that's not to be this week. But we'll make do.
We've been ping-ponging. But no, we have a lot to talk about. We already did a Sundance show that already happened. We talked about Sundance 2021 with, of course, Corey Woodruff. And that episode's already on the feed, so you can check it out. And it's on our YouTube channel, which we go live every week, so you can check that out, of course. But, and I forgot to mention, because you're probably wondering, but wait, John, where can I find full episodes of Cinemaholics? Well, I'll tell you. You can find our full archive on cinemaholics.com. And you can also find bonus content in there, like written reviews and all the extra things you have grown to love, we hope, on Cinemaholics. If this is your first time checking us out, thank you so much for being here. And, of course, we have a Patreon. What internet show doesn't? Patreon.com/Cinemaholics is where you can check out if you are interested in supporting us. You can also find our merch page. We appreciate any support you all can throw our way. We, of course, love our patrons and our merch getters. But like I mentioned before, lots of movies to get to. We're going to be doing a full review of Malcolm and Marie, the new film on Netflix, later in the show. We'll also be talking about A Glitch in the Matrix and Little Fish. We're going to start with some off topics, of course, and then some mini reviews, like little things we're not going to spend a ton of time on. First, though, we have a listener question. So we use the Swell app to do our voicemails, and we put this question out there on Swell. Do you still watch movie trailers? Well, while I bring this up, I've got the voicemails ready to go. But did you have any thoughts on this? Do you still watch these things?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, now that we're not in theaters as often, we mostly watch these movies from home. I tend to not watch trailers that often, just primarily because I don't know. I like trailers. I enjoy the experience of watching trailers before movies, but if I'm not in the theater locked down getting ready to watch something and having that building anticipation, I find that trailers tend to take away or rob a lot of the moments I like while experiencing a film for the first time. And that's not to say that, some trailers are very good at being brief and to the point and getting you excited about what the film is going to do without giving away too much. But more often than not nowadays, I feel like they're just kind of like little mini recaps that give you like pretty much all the main points just in a condensed 2-3 minute package. So I'll sometimes watch trailers more if I'm curious about what the film is or what it's going to look like. I'll watch like the teaser trailer or something like that. But like, for instance, I watched the trailer for Coming to America because I was very curious, like 30 years later, like what is this going to look like? Like, is it going to be as funny as the first one? Stuff like that. But these days, usually I don't watch trailers.
Yeah, I have to say, I am kind of in the same boat. I kind of realized over the course of like all the COVID stuff that I don't really watch trailers because I want to. I watch them because I'm a captive audience. I'm in the theater and it's like, I'll watch the trailer or whatever, with very few exceptions. And because we do this every week, I just feel like I don't need to watch the trailers because I know we're going to be covering things. I know we're going to be watching things, and I just really like the surprise. I really like just sort of going in as fresh as I can. And of course that gets ruined all the time because like we get on like Twitter and stuff, and clips will just play from trailers. And so we see snippets, but I do my best to like not actually watch the full thing. I still haven't seen the Godzilla vs. Kong trailer. I haven't seen the Coming to America trailer. There were just very, very, very few trailers I've seen. When we did Sundance, there weren't a lot of trailers for any of those movies, and there were a few maybe, but I didn't see anything because that's how I prefer to watch movies. And I guess I'm wondering to myself a little bit, like when we actually go into the theaters again, if I'm going to like purposely tune out of the trailers a lot more than I used to.
I don't know if you can, because aren't there usually like 20 or 30 minute blocks of trailers?
Right.
And,
well, yeah,
with everything pushed back. Yeah. That's gonna be weird. Like going back to movies and seeing the trailers, like for A Quiet Place 2 and all these things that we saw.
Yeah, it's like we've been blipped for like an Avengers Endgame. It's like
Pretty much, yeah.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, but okay. We're weirdos though, because like between Will and me, like we watch movies constantly, so like our opinion is kind of, it's outside the mainstream, it's outside of the norm, right? So we asked you listeners, not that you listeners are in the mainstream, I wouldn't say, but we did ask some of you fellow cinemaholics what you think and see if there's some differing opinions. We got a lot of responses. We're just gonna play 2 here. Maybe we'll play more next week or something. I'm not sure, but we've been getting more and more voicemails, so we're kind of like picking and choosing a little bit more than we used to. But of course, please use the Swell app to send us your voicemail. We want to hear from everybody, right? So here is a voicemail from username Wonderful, and here's his take on movie trailers.
Movie trailers. It's a good question. I used to watch movie trailers all the time. It was fun. I don't go to the theaters as often. In fact, the last movie I went to see in the theaters was Split. And that movie was good because I didn't see the trailers. I had no idea or concept of anything other than that M. Night Shyamalan was continuing his universe. That's all I had known. And I totally forgot about it till the end of the film. So I find trailers these days to be psychologically weak, and from the movie studios, they tend to really be desperate to get people to see it. So they end up showing like most of the best parts of the film because they're trying to get you excited to see it. So they have to show something. And I feel the best trailers don't reveal much, and they kind of show you footage that like makes the director's cut that they cut out of the film anyway, which can be annoying in itself for other reasons. But yeah, I find and there's too much trailers now. There's like a teaser trailer. It's teasing you that a trailer is coming. Then they have one trailer or two. They have some up to like 5 trailers. It's like you can kind of piece together a good portion of the film. So yeah, I kind of stopped. I'm not much of a trailer fan now. And I try to avoid them as much as I can. I would rather just see the film myself. And I even used to like there are movie reviewers out there I would watch before I seen a film, just because I enjoyed the reviews and stuff. And now I've kind of finally learned to just not watch it.
So that is from Wonderful, and I agreed with so much of what he just said. Just like, especially that whole thing about like how they become total recaps of the movies and they just give things away, and it's it's all just marketing, which is fine. They're just trying to get people to watch things that are not going to theaters. And yeah, did he say anything there you agreed with?
Well, I have to agree about the phenomenon or trend where it's like trailers or teasers for teasers, which is becoming incredibly annoying. I just saw
even in the trailer, like there's literally like a trailer for the trailer before the trailer starts in the same trailer you're watching.
But I think a day or two ago, I was on Twitter and I saw there was like a trailer out for Old, I think, the M. Night Shyamalan movie, but it was like only 6 seconds. And then I was like getting ready to watch a trailer for it, and it just ended. I was just like, I guess there's going to be something during the Super Bowl tonight. But... you
brewed it like a whole pot of coffee. Yeah, you know? Like this is going to be a good 2.5 minutes. Let's go.
Yeah, it's like let's see what M. Night Shyamalan has. And I guess the twist was that wasn't the full trailer. That was just
the twist.
That was 6 seconds of footage. But I have to say that's the thing that resonates with me the most. Is that I'm getting tired of this. Like, we're going to get soon trailers for trailers, and it's just going to be this box of or whatever that thing is called, where we just
you won't believe the way we tease what we tease.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm going to play one more voicemail here. This is from username Izzy, and here's her take on the question: do you still watch movie trailers?
This is such an interesting question. Okay, so I actually have never enjoyed trailers. As someone who adamantly despises spoilers. I felt like trailers were like a little bit too much info for me. There are a couple of exceptions to this, like Star Wars trailers. I had to watch those because I was just so excited I needed to watch them. But generally speaking, I have never enjoyed trailers. Even as a kid, going to movie theaters and stuff like that, like I didn't like watching trailers. I loved going into a movie blind, not knowing what exactly the movie was about, and kind of going along for the ride. I found it much easier, and I continue to still be this way. I find it much easier to enjoy the movie and get something out of a movie when I don't have any expectations going into it. Because going in with very high expectations and watching a movie is kind of giving a lot of room for disappointment. And movies take up so much time that I really want to enjoy it as much as I can. And I find that that's true when I don't watch a trailer to a movie and I just go in blind.
All right, that was from Izzy. And yeah, you know, it's weird, Will, because when I first heard this voicemail, I was like, well, I enjoy trailers. Like I enjoy like the act of like sitting down and like, you know, it depends on the movie, but like getting hyped up. But I wonder if like with time, you know, I was like, you know, I turned 30 and I'm just like, man, do I have time for this? Like, do I really need to be watching this trailer? I'm just going to watch the movie. Maybe I'm getting grumpy. Am I alone on that? Cause you know, you're a little bit younger than me, you know, maybe you're still fresh faced, doe-eyed.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you're saying, it just depends on the trailer. Like, there's some trailers I'll rewatch just because I think they're really well done. I like the adrenaline that they give me, but a lot of times I have to agree that I'd rather just go into a movie cold and just experience it for what it is. And like you're saying, with a lot of films at Sundance, like I think it's interesting to watch so many movies and have little to no idea of what they are, and just go in with a fresh perspective and just kind of see what they have in store from there. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like we were saying, I think it just depends on the film itself. But more often than not, the way trailers are put together now, it just seems like they're trying to sell you by telling you all the like juicy tidbits that happen. But like I think with all the movies we are reviewing this week, I think the only one I actually saw a trailer for was Earwig and The Witch, which I mean I don't think it affected my opinion one way or the other. But I mean I think I was better off not knowing anything about the films we covered than if I had seen a trailer for them. But that's just
interesting.
Me, at least. Yeah.
I didn't see a trailer for anything we're talking about. So seriously, I'm not lying. I've not been on the trailer game. So I'm not. It's not in a judgy way. It's not in a nobody should watch trailers way. Like I think if you actually get a kick out of it, like there were a couple of voicemails. I should have played at least one. There were a couple of voicemails where people were like, yeah, I like watching trailers. And I mean, even that one guy was like, I used to watch trailers all the time. Like it is like an entertainment unto itself in some ways. But like, I don't know. I feel like eventually like you start to see the formula and the pattern once you've seen enough of them, and then just becomes kind of pointless a little bit, or a little bit like, you know, you just grow out of it or something. I don't know how to phrase it in the best way.
Well, I mean, I remember back when there was like that Mummy trailer that came out, Mummy, the 2017 one that Tom Cruise did.
I was gonna say it was like the Brendan Fraser Tomb of the Dragon Emperor.
Well, there was that one, and then I think there was a Men in Black trailer where like they forgot to add the soundtrack to it, and you could just hear
that's right.
Like just like the footage of it. And I remember not only was that entertaining just for the absurdity of it, but it also gave you a pretty good understanding of like how these movies trailers are cut together and like how they use clips and stuff like that, and how
you mean
how
like
much
haphazardly at the last second.
Not only that, but just like how much music like impacts like the like adrenaline or like sense of momentum that they have, that like when you watch them without the music, it's just very this odd kind of insular experience that just is a very odd way to experience or be sold on a film. So I guess after that and a few other reasons, I've been less enchanted by trailers. But I don't know. I enjoy them here and there. Just I agree that like, when you watch so many before a film, they kind of lose their luster. And I feel like some of the movies we experienced the past few years, I might have gotten more out of them if I hadn't been experienced the trailers like 7 or 8 times, having seen them over and over and over again at the AMC or something. But
like Star is Born and
maybe I don't know.
I was gonna say like my favorite example of this was or my favorite example of like when movie trailers started to lose me was when Suicide Squad had their trailer, right? And like
Yep.
it was so different from like what the movie was going to be that they ended up like hiring the trailer people to
Right.
make the movie. And I just feel like we hit like a nexus at that when that happened, because it was like from that point on, I feel like everybody just started losing their minds when it comes to how like like trailer culture, I guess, and like how hype gets like people, so like there's just such a machine behind it. It's like you get your, especially with the Star Wars movies, like Izzy mentioned, it's like you get this like trailer out and it becomes an event. Everybody has to see it. There has to be like 300,000 videos about like dissecting every little thing about it. And I think I
Reaction
just
videos and stuff like
yeah,
that.
reactions. Like I don't know. It's not as interesting to me. I know it's interesting to other people and it's totally valid. It's just like, I don't know. I just feel like I'm so sick of it at this point. I guess it's a personal thing.
It's a commodity in and of itself, as I mentioned. Yeah, like the whole culture reacting to trailers. I don't get that at all. I mean, if that's your thing and people like that, or you make some income from that, I mean,
By
God
all
bless.
means.
But I don't get that at all. Yeah, that's a part of the trailer culture I really don't understand. But the trailers themselves, like we said, I think it just depends on the film itself and what trailer they sell. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to wrap it up.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Speaking of the culture and films that are impacting the culture, and just let's do a quick little mini review, because you had time to check out Earwig and the Witch, which is, my understanding, it's on HBO Max, and this is a kind of co-production, right? It's like Studio Ghibli, but also NHK,
Yeah.
which I don't know if people here are like super familiar with NHK. It's like a Japanese like broadcasting business. I think I don't want to reduce it down to saying it's like their PBS, but it's kind of essentially in that zone. So it's an interesting thing. It came out, I think, or premiered in December, and it's now available to see on HBO Max, because HBO Max has all the Studio Ghibli stuff. And I'm interested in this one, Will, but you had time to squeeze this in. It's computer animated, by the way. It's not hand drawn, and it's based on a novel. So that's about everything I know about it. But yeah, you saw it. What's the scoop on this one?
Yeah, I mean, well, first I was going to ask you, are you a fan of Studio Ghibli? I have to assume so. But
Oh,
I don't
absolutely.
I don't think we've talked about Studio Ghibli. I'm a fan, yeah.
Not to a huge degree. I think here and there we've talked about some of the films, but we've never reviewed a film, I don't think, from Studio Ghibli together.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I think this is the first one they've released in, I think, like 5 or 6 years. I could be mistaken there, but I believe it's like the first one they've done in a good while. And it does...
I'll fact check you on that while you do your thing.
But yeah, to what you were saying before, this is based on a novel of the same name by Diane Wayne Jones, who I believe is the author behind Howl's Moving Castle as well. So there is a little bit of a history here with Studio Ghibli, and it's also directed by Goro Miyazaki, who is, of course, the son of Hayao Miyazaki, who is, the kind of like the John Lasseter figure of Studio Ghibli, without the baggage, of course. But yeah, like... with Studio Ghibli, I think what many people enjoy is not so much the simplicity of the stories, but just the way that they kind of have this deliberate kind of a way of getting you immersed into their worlds through the patience that's delivered through their animation, and that's through the majesty of how they're made, and like just the patience that goes into crafting every single image to make something that's very immersive. And you can just see the work that goes into every single frame of those movies. And that's not to say that every single one is as good as the other, but I think more often than not the work pays off, and you get a lot of really great films. For instance, My Neighbor Totoro, or Spirited Away, or Kiki's Delivery Service, or Princess Mononoke, especially in terms of animation.
Marnie was there as a personal favorite of mine.
Okay, yeah. I believe, yeah.
I was going to say, Red Turtle was there. I checked it out. Red Turtle is their most recent, and that was 2016.
Okay.
So, yeah, you were about right there, because, yeah, it's not quite 5 years. It's like 4.5. But, yeah, you were really close.
But, yeah, I mean, this is the, like you're saying, this is their first CG effort, which is interesting for a number of reasons, mainly of which is that there's that video that goes around. I forget which documentary it's from, but Miyazaki, the father of Miyazaki, Hayao Miyazaki, is watching a like artificial intelligence video, and there's that sound clip that he has where he's like, I strongly believe this is an insult to life itself, which you can see like the faces of the animators go white when they see that, because it just a strong inclination that like what CG is doing to their company would just undermine everything that they're delivering, which is why it's so fascinating that they released this movie, because it just seems like such an odd thing to get from their company, but it does seem to suggest that like they're trying to expand. They realize that they can't spend 5 to 7 years making every single one of their movies. They'd go bankrupt if they did. But I did want to go into this one with a little bit of an open mind because the reviews for it are so overwhelmingly negative. I think because of the CG animation, I think people were kind of coming into this with their knives out already, and so I was like, all right, I'll give this a shot. Like I want to see what they're able to do with the CG animation. Like I said before, I saw the trailer and I wasn't really wowed by it. It did have this kind of cold mechanical look to it, as you would expect from CG. That was just the antithesis of what you would get from a Studio Ghibli film. So I was like, all right, I'm not really sold in the trailer. I'm not really seeing what they're doing here that warrants this departure from the hand-drawn animation, but I want to see what they got here. And ultimately, I think even beyond the animation itself, this movie just does not work, primarily because I think Goro Miyazaki just doesn't really seem to have the care or the nuance that his father has in terms of like plotting and characterization. The plotting of this movie, I think it's trying to go for that kind of deliberate approach, like I was saying before, where their characters kind of gradually live out their lives, and there's that Kiki's Delivery Service kind of thing where we see and study a character throughout her life and this change in her life. But because the animation is this CG style that doesn't complement the image like it did with their hand-drawn animation, it doesn't have that sense of awe or grandeur, so it has this tedious, mundane pacing that isn't really inviting or enticing, and even at 82 minutes, it does kind of grind on more than it should, and that's made worse by the fact that primarily for most of the movie, not a whole lot happens. We see our main character get adopted by this witch and her husband, and we see her trying to learn these witch-like powers, but there's no real urgency to the story. There's not a lot of incentive for what our main character wants, like what she's trying to achieve outside of becoming a witch. And ultimately, the narrative itself just has this kind of lackluster quality to it that makes it even more strikingly against what we see typically in a Studio Ghibli film. And for that reason, quite a few others, I have to agree with a lot of the criticisms of the film and say that this one just fails to live up to the standards of the company. And I think maybe because Studio Ghibli has such high standards, that makes it worse. But I think just on its own terms, this movie just doesn't work.
That's really sad to hear. Yeah, I didn't have the highest expectations, but I did know that they were going to put this out at Cannes. So that made me think, So I was like, like maybe this is really going to be quite an effort. But yeah, I'm sad to hear that you and a lot of the critics just are not feeling it. So
I don't know. I mean, it's a very compelling argument for why they shouldn't do CG, which I mean, I guess it's good in that respect. But otherwise, I don't really see what they're hoping to achieve with this. And if they had something that was compelling or unique to 12 here, it might have gotten lost either with the CG animation or with the approach, which doesn't really seem that animated, ironically. So,
do you give this one a C for CGI?
Yeah, I think I don't think C- is really warranted here, just because I think there's an agreeable pace to it that I think doesn't make me feel angry as far as like what it does or what it's not able to achieve. But by the end
just like
of it,
that phrasing. There's an agreeable pace that doesn't make me angry.
Yes,
I like that a lot.
But I mean, I wasn't really mad with it until the end when I realized it just didn't amount to much. Throughout the film, I was just kind of more like half interested to bored. Like I feel like there was something that was trying to be achieved here that just didn't really get realized, or something got lost in translation that made it unappealing by and large. But I don't think this is as awful as some reviews are suggesting. Like I said, I think the knives were out from the beginning, so I think people were willing to criticize it from the get-go just because it's so against what Studio Ghibli is, and it feels like Daddy Miyazaki said, like an insult to what the company was trying to do from the get-go. But I mean, I think if you took away it being a Studio Ghibli movie, it's just a fairly mediocre animated film. Like if this was released by DreamWorks or something like that, I think it would just get a kind of ho-hum response because it's just a fairly mediocre film. But knowing it comes from Studio Ghibli just makes it more baffling and disappointing. So yeah, I'd say a low C fits here.
Kind of baffling to me too. That's I mean, it's not a surprise that they tried with computer animation. It's just a surprise that, like, man, it's your first one. You got to get it. You got to get it right, and it just seems like something went wrong there.
Yeah, I mean, it does remind me of when Flushed Away came out and Armin Animation did that kind of CG departure, because they were like, well, instead of making all these claymations for like 5 years, why don't we just do CG? And it just was like, yeah, don't do that again.
There you go.
And that's how I feel about Earwig and The Witch as well.
All right. We were going to mention real quick, there is the movie Falling, which we've already talked about on the show a bunch of times. This is the feature debut of Viggo Mortensen as director. He also wrote the film, and neither of us really cared for it. And it stars himself, but also Lance Henriksen as his father, and then a rotating cast that like goes back and forth in time. And we're not really going to do like a full-on mini review for it at this point, since we have already talked about it. We're not fans. But just letting people know you can check it out for yourself. If you've heard us talk about it before and are curious about it, want to look into it, I believe it's available to stream on demand right now.
Yeah,
as far as I understand. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely not a huge surprise. The thing kind of came and went at Sundance last year. And I think it was also going to screen at Toronto, and then they really figured out the critics were not responding to it, and here we are. At the same time, it actually has a decent Rotten Tomato score. It's not like super low, but I think that's mainly because they think people are praising the performances. The funny thing though about mentioning this film right now is the fact that its subject matter relates pretty directly with one of the films we're talking about today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, I remember when I saw it at TIFF or Virtual TIFF. It got a little bit of a warmer response than it did at Sundance, which was pretty overwhelmingly negative. I think it got kind of a mixed to negative response at TIFF, and it does sound like you're saying like the reviews are now like kind of mixed to like slightly positive. So it is interesting in terms of like critical cycle of the film, but I mean I'm with you. I think it's ultimately just an okay film, and it didn't really live up to my expectations either way. But yeah.
I'm still a C- on it, but it sounds like you're a little higher.
Yeah, I think I was a C+ ultimately on it. And I think it's less that I don't think it sets out what it wants to do as much as that I think the key elements are there, but it's just so aggressively mean-spirited and negative that I didn't really find it to be really worth the while. But I think there's enough there that's really interesting and worthwhile. And I think if Viggo Mortensen wanted to do another film as a director, I'd be curious to check it out. But this one didn't really do it for me.
Sure. All right, and this one, though, we just recently saw, so we can say a little bit more. That's Life in a Day 2020, which just actually hit YouTube, but we saw this at Sundance. It screened on like Monday or Tuesday, and this is the, I guess, kind of sequel to Life in a Day, which came out in 2010, and it came out in 2011, should say, but it's about 2010. But Life in the Day is like this whole thing where Kevin McDonald basically has like a bunch of people send videos from all over the world documenting any part of their day, like a single day this year or this part of the decade that's taking place on, I think it's like July something 2020. And so it's like right in the middle of the pandemic, which means that this documentary, which I have to believe they were planning on doing well before COVID was a thing, kind of came and it ended up being, partly about the pandemic. Obviously the pandemic is like a part of it. It's there. There's like segments of the documentary where we see people kind of dealing with, COVID, but there's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot of stuff actually in this. People are doing way more things than just like wearing masks and everything. It starts with, a series of childbirth scenes, and it delves into topics like romance. There's like a heartbreaking breakup that happens like right after some of the lovey-dovey stuff. It's a lot of like ping-ponging of like human experience, and I appreciate this thing way more as an experiment as I do a piece of entertainment. I don't actually think it's very entertaining. Like just sitting and watching it, I'm not gripped. I'm not like, wow, this is what humanity is experiencing. I'm just sort of like, that's neat. Like, this person was doing that. I don't know. It's like looking through somebody else's photos for me a little bit of like, that's very nice that you got to do that. Although there were a few times where I was kind of like, whoa, the film does kind of shock you at certain points. There's a particular scene we won't give away that harkens directly back to the previous film and in a way that I wasn't expecting. But overall, I think this thing is like, again, it's a cute little, not cute, that's kind of mean, isn't it? I was gonna say like a cute little project. No, it's an interesting, it's intriguing, and it's sometimes insightful. I just don't think there's that much to it beyond a sort of like curious watch on YouTube, which actually I like the fact that it's on YouTube, because that means a lot of people, I feel like that's a good environment for it, considering the like crowd curation of the entire thing. I mean, it really is starring and it's by the people. All Kevin McDonald's really doing here is stitching things together and sort of telling kind of a loose narrative. But yeah, well, what was your take on Life in a Day? Were you into it?
Well, for one, the narrative is all over the place in this thing. There's so many divergent characters that there's no thorough line to. I'm just kidding. I thought it was all right. I think having seen the first Life in a Day in 2011, like you mentioned, I think the novelty wasn't there this time. I think I was a little bit more enchanted with the fact that they were able to pull it off the first time. And also I was younger, like I was, like just out of high school or something when I saw it. So I think I was a little bit more taken aback by what they were able to do that time.
And we should say,
yeah,
quick, to your point on that, it was a totally different culture. Right.
Yeah.
Like nowadays, people take videos all the time. We didn't have Snapchat in 2010. You know, like it's just a totally different environment where people are constantly taking videos of themselves. So the novelty of that has also gone in a huge way.
Yeah. But I mean, it is well edited. Like I think they did a decent job. And like you're saying, like it is more visually interesting than I anticipated, because I was worried there was just going to be a lot of people in their apartments losing their minds and yelling at each other or something. Like I was worried that was what the movie was going to be, and it was going to be a miserable experience. But like you suggested, it's a darker
Speaking
sequel.
of Malcolm and Marie.
Yeah. I mean, in true sequel fashion, it's a darker sequel for a number of reasons, as you would expect. But yeah, I mean, I think if you haven't seen the first one and you check this out on YouTube, you'll probably get a little bit more out of it, just because it is more of the same. Like, I mean, it's not the same exact things, but it does pretty much do the same type of thing, and it does it decently well enough. Like, it's a well-produced thing. Like you said, YouTube is behind it, so they make it a pretty glossy package. But yeah, I mean, when it was over, I pretty much quickly forgot about it until I saw it was available on YouTube yesterday, or on Friday.
Same here, honestly.
And yeah, I didn't. Of all the movies I saw at Sundance, that's probably the one I've thought about the least until now. So I don't know if that really is what they wanted me to feel, but while I was watching it, I thought it was pleasant enough, I guess. Besides, like you said, all the tragic, sad stuff that was going on throughout. But yeah, I mean, it's life affirming. It's nice what it is, and I think general audiences will like it. But nothing you need to seek out unless you're on YouTube.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm a gentle B-. Very close to a C+, but I feel like it's hard to complain about this movie, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I was verging on a C+, and then I thought about it, and I was just like, it is what it is. It's nice.
Yeah,
like,
don't be mean.
Yeah,
That's what I was telling myself.
Right. I do think it's interesting that the people they focus on, like half of them I could really care less about, and a couple of them I was really interested to know their stories. And I don't know if that's just more of a personal thing or if that's just what they wanted it to be. But I mean, it is fairly diverse in its perspective, and I do think you'll get to see enough of a different plate of people's lives that it does make it interesting. Like, it doesn't feel like it's insulated to the point where it's like I'm only seeing a handful of perspectives in this thing. They do a pretty good job of making it a worldwide experience and seeing all these different environments and stuff on this one day in 2020. So yeah, B-, a very low B-, I think is fitting for this.
All right. That is Life in a Day 2020. It is available on YouTube. All right, that's it for mini reviews. Let's get into our big review of the week. We're going to talk about Malcolm and Marie.
You are by far the most excruciating, difficult, stubbornly obnoxious woman I've ever met in my entire life. I fucking love you.
Oh, he's so sensitive. He's romantic. I bet he's sweet, right? Well, I mean, yeah. When he's not being an emotional fucking terrorist.
Oh. I love the way you see the world, Marie.
Mystery. The unknown. It's what supports the tension of a relationship.
You're angry.
No. The what if factor.
Marie.
What if there's someone who loved them better?
Give me your pain.
Malcolm and Marie is a new film. It's now on Netflix. I think it came on Netflix on Friday, and we're, of course, recording this on a Sunday. And this is a black and white romantic drama. It's kind of like a bottle episode movie. It's just two actors, two characters in a single house that takes place in Malibu, although they filmed this in Carmel, actually. Carmel, which is closer to Northern California and one of my favorite places and destinations. Just going to say that.
I was going to say, I'm sure you're disappointed that your cameo got cut, as one of the neighbors concerned about what's going on in the house, but oh well.
I do appreciate that bit. Yeah, and Carmel's a decent drive from here, but it's a beautiful place, and we're in I've been to Malibu, and my favorite line from this movie is "F Malibu." Just gonna put that out there, no hate, but okay. So Malcolm and Marie stars John David Washington and Zendaya. And Zendaya and John David Washington, I believe they also produced this film, along with the director, Sam Levinson, who else? He wrote the film, of course.
Yeah.
And it's just a heated one crazy night. I don't know if one crazy night actually fits. It's like one night of these two people fighting. That's basically the premise. John David Washington plays a guy who is a film director who they're coming home from a big movie premiere. And he's getting all of these accolades. People are calling him they're comparing him to other black film directors like Barry Jenkins and John Singleton. And he's kind of like in a whiplash of emotions over it, where he's like, these people are praising me, but in like my previous movie, there is this woman from the LA Times who panned me. Now she wants to be all nice to me. And this film, weirdly enough, it's a lot about relationships. It's a lot about how fights work, how like the woman in the fights, Marie, played by Zendaya, you can tell right away that she's upset, that she's angry, but he's completely oblivious to it. I'm sure a lot of people will be watching that and be like, yep, well aware of that dynamic. And there is a lot of contemplation in this film about film criticism. Weirdly enough, the film is about you and me, Will. We're the stars for once.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I don't know. I mean, it's only annoying in that it's hard to criticize or praise something because you feel like you're playing into its hand either way.
Right.
So you have to be kind of you have to be deliberate in your choices and what you say about it, because it's like if you say one thing and it comes across wrong, it's like, well, that's what the movie was trying to say, and it's like, all right, fine.
You're the film critic he's complaining about. Yeah. There's a lot of gross stuff about that, actually. So Sam Levinson, let's talk about him real quick. So Sam Levinson directed one of my favorite films of 2018, Assassination Nation.
Yeah.
Fantastic film. Absolutely loved
it.
I haven't seen Euphoria, but he does that with Zendaya. So they're clearly creative partners here in the sense that they're putting out, pretty artistic stuff. I haven't seen Euphoria, but I've heard it's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, we should note that the reason this movie came to be is because they wanted to film season 2 of Euphoria, and the production got shut down because of COVID. So I guess Zendaya reached out to Sam Levinson and was like, hey, can we do something, just like a small little thing while we're waiting for COVID to pass? I think at the time they probably assumed that COVID was just going to be a small thing, but oh well. In that time, I think he wrote the script in, I want to say, a month or two, and you can kind of tell. They filmed it over the summer of 2020. They didn't tell anybody about it until it was finished, and they're like, hey, who wants to buy it? And then Netflix got it, and here we are. Yeah.
I know HBO and A24 were looking at getting it. I think even Searchlight was interested. And, I'm not surprised because it didn't cost a lot of money to make. It's very low budget, around $2-3 million. And they obviously don't have to do a ton of marketing. And even though it was filmed during COVID, I believe last summer, it's hey, look, another For Life in the Day. Look at that. It's not about COVID. That has nothing to do with the story. It is just this story about these two people and their relationship. And it's very much about how artists and storytellers, where do they get their ideas? Where do the stories themselves come from? And how do you properly credit the people who inform the life experiences that you turn into a film? I know, we both have done creative projects, that are not just criticizing things. I've written books, and I've drawn from my personal experiences quite a lot when writing stories. And also I've drawn from other people's lives. It's kind of a thing you feel like you have to do almost, like when you're writing, because anything that isn't otherwise it just doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like a real human thing unless it's like tied to some sort of memory or it's drawn by some inspiration. All of that stuff, I really, really enjoyed how the film sort of tackles all of that. I really enjoy the staging, the blocking, the music choices, which are a little obvious. There's some times where you're like, oh my gosh, like the music couldn't be more on the nose. But it all pretty much works because it's such a contained film, and it's very like, it's very gripping. It's hard to like watch this film in the background because there's so much heightened emotion, and the writing is so fresh and sharp. And, you know, I say all this and I'm like, why don't I love this movie? Why do I not really like it? I even like most of what it's saying about critics. I think especially like the first rant that Malcolm's character goes on about critics, I actually thought was like very poignant. And I also thought that it not only was it kind of going after critics, but it was also going after film directors who like pretend they don't care about film criticism. And clearly we can see that's not the case. And the film actually had, I thought, some like subtle, nuanced things to say about both sides of that spectrum of like the people who make art, the people who criticize it. And I thought there was a lot of interesting play there. But then the film just like starts to really dive into some like strange, tone deaf territory about identity and like actually like targeting a real film critic who, you know, I was looking this up after the film. Sam Levinson is clearly going after an LA Times critic who panned his movie Assassination Nation a few years ago. And it's just hard to separate that, you know, it's hard to separate that he's really just being petty and griping about a film critic who, you know, I'm a fan of. I think she does great work. And it's just mean-spirited to me.
I mean, are we not allowed to say who it is, or do you just want to keep it vague?
I think we can. I mean, she's been kind of outspoken about it. I just was going to like leave it vague, but it is Katie Walsh,
sure,
who I believe was freelance writing for LA Times at the time of that review.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, just, full disclosure, like I'm more of an acquaintance, if anything, to Katie Walsh, but we both have written at or around the same time for the playlists, and I think we follow each other on Twitter and stuff. So I am a very, very loose acquaintance to Katie Walsh, but I feel like I have to kind of come up with...
I'm not. I've never talked to her or anything, so I don't have any... I've just followed her work.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, just want to make that clear from the get-go. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. I just think the whole thing is, it just feels really gross how he kind of goes after her for writing a review. And I think it kind of undermines what I think is working about the first part of the movie. And then also, I think that like, cut this movie by 20, 30 minutes and you really have something smooth. But I think by that last act, I was just like, I'm sick of this. And you can tell the characters are sick of it too, but I think that it's just exhausted of like all of its points it's trying to make. And I think it brings the entire movie down for me. So I just found myself really dissatisfied by the end of it. But what about you? I hope you liked it more than me, because I'm trying to like it more. I'm trying, because there's really good stuff here. And I feel like there's a lot of people who will watch this and really like it. So I don't want to make it sound like it's this terrible film. It's not really. It's just a film that really let me down.
Yeah, I mean, I had decent expectations for this. It's a type of thing I really do like, which is, like you said, a kind of chamber film with just two characters talking about their lives and just hashing it out in the moment. Like, my favorite movie, or the movie I put in number one in 2019, is Marriage Story, which is probably a direct influence for this film in some fashion or another, because it has a similar idea of just, you know, two pristine actors often just yelling and being very brutal and honest with each other for extended periods of time. I think the difference between Marriage Story and something like this, or even a Cassavetes film, which is clearly what this movie is trying to evoke or trying to be hearkening back to in some fashion or another.
Especially Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf got the clear, you know.
Yeah, which I don't think is Cassavetes, but...
no, just bringing that up as another...
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of influences here for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think the difference between those type of films or those pieces of work or those plays in this film is that I feel like, for the most part, those feel grounded in reality. They feel honest in some fashion or another. That feels tangible, and I can understand where the characters are coming from. And with this film, I didn't really get that for the most part. Like, I feel like they are primarily characters that the screenwriter made that are just basically two parts of himself, where he's just having an extended argument with himself, like his kind of more egotistical, more brash side, his narcissistic side is supposed to be Malcolm, and then the kind of more socially relevant, more down to earth personality of him is supposed to be Zendaya. And I think I just don't see them as characters at that point. I just see them as an extension of the screenwriter kind of having an emboldened argument with himself, which it can be fine and entertaining, except that the movie so often goes out of its way to be, unpleasant or mean-spirited or just disagreeable in so many fashions that it's just hard to really get invested or interested in the characters if they don't feel real, and I don't really like them for that reason. So for me, I just found it to be, like I said, I think it's aesthetically pleasing. It looks great. Like, it's shot on 35 millimeter black and white film. It does look very sharp in terms of its blocking. I do think Sam Levinson is proving himself to be a pretty talented and well-studied filmmaker. But I just, at the end of the day, when I'm watching it, I just don't really feel connected in a sincere way with the characters. It feels like this effort is ultimately a fairly insincere one. Like, he is just basically posturing, basically trying to prove something to people, even though all of his past work, like I said, Assassination Nation is pretty well acclaimed.
Yeah.
Euphoria is it's considered one of the best shows on television. So if this is someone like Lars von Trier, like, who gets like a pretty divided response and like the critics don't often understand him or something like that, maybe I can understand where Sam Levinson's coming from. But like, to focus so intently on Katie Walsh and her one negative review, just like you're saying, it just feels weirdly very petty. And I get that that's kind of the point. But, like, this movie is 105 minutes long, and that scene that you're talking about is, like, 10 minutes of the film? So that's, like, 1/10 of the film.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
It goes on so long.
And you get it.
Tough.
Yeah.
Like, how do you sell a movie like that to people who don't care? Like,
Right.
do a lot of people care about what an LA Times film critic has to say about a film director's artistic movie that, like, most people aren't going to see?
Yeah,
Like,
but
it's so small.
And I get that, like, that's trying to prove that, like, Malcolm is such a narcissistic, egotistic personality, but it's like, I kind of feel like that point was already made, and it just feels like this monologue is very self-serving. It's just like him trying, because you could say the same thing in 4 less minutes and you get the point across, but to draw it out for 8 minutes or so, I mean, kudos to John David Washington for delivering that monologue.
Oh my
but,
gosh.
yeah,
he kills it. And another thing, basically.
But from a writing standpoint, it just feels shallow and pedantic, I guess. It just feels like this kind of overindulgent, like, masturbatory kind of conversation with oneself that harkens back to, like, kind of early screenwriting, like the type of thing you'd see in a screenwriting course where, like, the writer is mimicking other influences, but it doesn't fully have the life experiences to make it grounded in some sense of authenticity.
Yeah, it's difficult because this movie has so many, like, little pleasures too. Like, there's moments here and there where I found myself chuckling or smiling. One of my favorite parts is, like, actually during the first part of that monologue when he's, like, reading through the review and just, like, being like, that's a steady cam, you moron, like stuff like that. Also, when he's like, you only know that because I said that at the premiere. Like, I kind of, like, had to pause and start laughing. That was actually really funny. But again, that's the kind of thing that, like, okay, film critics get that, but, like, do a lot of people, and I don't know, it just feels so full of itself in terms of, like, what people care about, I guess.
And that's the thing for me, is that as much as I want to complain about that, those are the more entertaining moments of the film, because that's the point where Sam Levinson has something to say. Like, everything else just feels like fairly shallow, and just like I just don't feel like those other moments in between are even that honest. And then I think that's more annoying to me, because it just feels like characters are just talking to talk. Like, I don't really feel like what he's saying comes grounded in some sort of authenticity or something that he can really explain beyond the surface level. And to me, that's even more annoying than anything he might have to say about film critics.
There's been a lot of conversation about how he's writing the story here, and he's using black characters, mainly Malcolm, to complain about identity and, like, how you can't actually, like, talk about things unless you have, like, certain points. And I keep going back and forth on this. I think that, like, okay, in any movie, it might be a little extreme to use the term of saying, like, you're using your actors as a ventriloquist when, actors are people. And a lot of the time they do have a lot of say in this thing. We don't know how much say Zendaya had as a producer in this movie, and John David Washington.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I heard that they both had a pretty heavily influence on the film, or that they gave some heavy notes, and that they had a hand in forming the screenplay. So I do think they were involved.
Of the doubt,
yeah.
To all three of them, and I think a lot of that weirdness, it just comes from the fact that you are talking about something that's really complicated, and you have to do a really good job of explaining. You have to do a really good job of making your case, and like there's some things about it that I'm like, yeah, that's a good point. That there is a lot of like. There is like a segment of film criticism that is just not very good at parsing out quality. It's just sometimes it feels like they're writing synopsises, where they're just sort of like, they're casting aspersions on something because of identity instead of reckoning with it. In a lot of it, there's good commentary there.
Yeah, and I'm sure I'm guilty of that, and maybe you are too. I don't know. I can't speak for you, but yeah, I think that's valid commentary. But yeah, I mean, the way it's delivered, just I don't think the execution matches what it's saying in terms of that commentary.
It's weird. It should work, or I should say it this way. It would be really difficult for it to work. And I just don't think it quite gets there. And it's a shame because like there is a lot of effort, and it's just such a hard thing to make. It's such a hard thing to write. And I just walked away from it not really knowing like, well, what are you trying to say about film criticism that's important? And I just got to say, like, I wish I had gotten more out of it than I did. But what about the relationship stuff? Did you find the relationship stuff as interesting? Like their conflict? Because I will say there were elements of it that I thought were kind of fascinating, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the best thing about the film outside of the look of it is Zendaya's performance. Like, I genuinely think she does a really good job in this, and I think, she's putting her all into it. She's really proving herself to be a tremendous up-and-coming actress. I mean, we've seen her in quite a few things recently. Like you mentioned, I haven't watched Euphoria, but I've seen clips, and I've seen the Spider-Man movies and a few other things she's done. I think she was in Greatest Showman, and she's really coming into her own. It's great to see this leading actress showcase that continues to prove her talents and shows how versatile and how she can excel in drama and comedy and all this stuff. And I mean, if all this movie ultimately does is prove once more that Zendaya is a great young actress, then all right, fine. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the relationship stuff, I guess I'm kind of similar to you. Like, I think some of it's kind of fun and playful. I think other parts of it are, kind of tedious and overdrawn. But I kind of wish the movie had more the tone of the one scene, without giving away, involves a cell phone, a credit card, and the LA Times paywall. And it felt like that scene is more acutely self-aware and funny than the rest of the movie, and the way it plays out, and the chemistry that Zendaya and John David Washington have in that scene, I think is really fun and entertaining. And I was like, why is this not the film? Like, why is this kind of more satirotic tone not being deployed more? Because I think that would level out a lot of the criticisms that I have, or a lot of the complaints I've been hearing, if it had kind of more of that winky, ironic tone. But because it takes itself fairly seriously throughout, that I just think it becomes kind of bogged down in its own self-seriousness.
Ever since you mentioned it too, I've been thinking like, man, kind of wish John Cassavetes had made like a Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Like maybe like a late 70s version or something. I would actually watch that. I
think it's funny to me that like so many of these filmmakers like Sam Levinson and a few other up and coming filmmakers, many of which are from famous filmmakers.
Yeah, Barry
they're
Levinson.
trying they're trying to evoke back to John Cassavetes, and then you have the actual son of John Cassavetes and Gina Rollins, Nick Cassavetes. He's making movies like The Notebook and Alpha Dog, and these like studio affairs that are just totally against what his dad is doing, and I find that to be a fascinating dichotomy for a number of reasons. But that's a whole
Hollywood, baby.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Malcolm and Marie. There's again. I keep saying it. There's good stuff here. It's just this seems like a very like inaccessible movie. Like I don't know anyone I would recommend it to. The only people I know who would really like enjoy a lot of the commentary are people who've already seen it because they're aware of it, and there's been hot take and think piece upon hot take and think piece about it. So it's just a big old miss for me. So I'm a C on Malcolm and Marie, not to rhyme it.
Yeah.
C for Carmel.
Sure. I think it's a movie that's made, written, and designed for Sam Levinson, and I hope whatever he got out of it, he got out of it. And I don't actually feel that negatively towards it. I think in the end, I think it's just an okay film. Like I think it's aesthetically pleasing. Like I said, I think the performances help to level out some of the clunkiness of the screenplay, and I do think Sam Levinson, as we mentioned, does display enough talent and versatility as a filmmaker to hopefully establish himself in ways that aren't quite this petty moving forward. But I think the movie itself I didn't really find it worth the while. Like I didn't really find myself too invested in it, and I find the characters too inaccessible to really feel like they have some sense of authenticity or sense of believability to make it an gripping experience beyond just the kind of flashy dialogue and the snappy cinematography. But I'm a C plus on it. I don't think it's awful. I don't think it's quite as bad as people are making it out to be. But at the same time, I didn't really enjoy the experience of watching this film. I don't, like you said, I don't really know who I'd recommend it to. And I think outside the award circuits, it's not really going to make much of a splash. I think people are going to kind of be put off by it for the first half and then just shut it off of Netflix and go on with their lives. And I don't blame them. And, that is what it is. And that's that.
All right. Well, Malcolm and Marie is available to watch right now on Netflix. It is 106 minutes long. A bit too long for my taste, but if you're curious about it after hearing us talk about it, then by all means, check it out and let us know what you think. Let's move on to our next film. This is actually a very recent film that we saw, A Glitch in the Matrix, which actually premiered at Sundance, and it's kind of having like an Insta, availability kind of thing. But yeah, Glitch in the Matrix is a documentary that explores simulation theory, and you're able to rent or buy it on demand right now. Will and myself managed to check it out kind of at the last minute because neither of us saw it at Sundance. We kind of prioritized other things, and I think we kind of agreed. It's like, this is about to come out, so like, let's watch other stuff. You know what I mean?
I would have done the same thing for Life in a Day too if I had realized how quickly it was going to come out. But I think we made the right call just waiting because there are so many things at Sundance we wanted to check out. But yeah, we've seen it anyway, so here we are.
Yeah. So this is from Rodney Asher, who's made a bunch of documentaries. I'm blanking on. I know Room 237 is like the one kind of more similar to this. The one that's about The Shining.
And then there's also The Nightmare, which is about sleep paralysis.
That's the other
came
one.
out,
Yes,
I believe in 2016, if I'm recalling correctly.
Oh man, was it that long ago? It might have been 2015, 2016. There you go.
I think
So this new film, Glitch in the Matrix, it's not exactly like Room 237. It's not really about the Matrix. It's actually just more exploring the philosophy behind the Matrix, simulation theory, which is just this simple question of, are we in fact living in a simulation? And the documentary actually like covers a lot of Philip K. Dick's commentary, especially like in the latter half of the 20th century, when his novels were really taking off, as you might know from things like Blade Runner and Total Recall, Man in the High Castle. Philip K. Dick, as a science fiction author, was really interested in like the whole idea of like, is this our reality? Think of like the end of Inception. Is he still in a dream? The Matrix, of course, which is like Neo finding out that, he's been living in the Matrix and he's never really used his eyes for, the first time, all of that stuff. And simulation theory is the thing that goes way, way back to like Descartes. It's a very tricky thing because as this documentary dives into, it can create almost like an existential crisis for people, because then you start to wonder, if this isn't reality, then does that mean there are any consequences for what I do? So the documentary starts to get into that territory. And that all sounds really interesting, right? That's my bag. That's the kind of thing I'm totally, yes, let's do it. Let's talk about simulation theory, because I think it's a fascinating topic. But I got to say, Will, my college course my sophomore college course in philosophy was more insightful than this documentary. And I don't know how this happened. Like, I just found this completely like the most surface level, like Reddit thread, the movie. That's mean to Reddit. I've found Reddit threads more like detailed and substantive than what this documentary does with simulation theory. It's such a boring intro to this subject, and I'm really kind of annoyed with it. Like, I hope people see it and are like, wow, this is a kind of interesting, and then find other things that are going to like really dive into it, because I was super disappointed in how this turned out. But I don't know. What about you, Will? Am I being grumpy?
For me, I'm a really big fan of Rodney Asher's filmography. I do think that his past two films, like you said, Room 237 and The Nightmare. I think what makes those two films so compelling to me is that with Room 237, it's about The Shining, like loosely, obviously. I mean, it's about how people perceive The Shining, but beyond that, it's about like how we perceive reality, or how we take in the things that we consume as pop culture, and like how our individual perspectives allow us to see one single piece of art in a variety of different ways. And I think that's a really fascinating conversation, that because the filmmaker allows all these different subjects to divulge into their fan theories, becomes a very interesting piece of art in terms of exploring what art means to us and how it emboldens us, or kind of justifies a lot of things we perceive about society.
Yeah, I want to be clear. I'm a huge fan of Room 237.
Yeah.
As you probably are aware, considering my relationship to fan theories, and I 100% echo everything you just said. It's such a great covering of how fan theories work, and like headcanon, stuff like that. All that stuff is really good.
And with The Nightmare, I similarly agree. Like, I think that film is really diving into like what scares us, and like if we are trapped within our own selves, like what would terrify us the most, and like what really gets under our skins when we have to confront our fears in such a direct way. And I think that's also a really fascinating film. I might even like that film a little bit more than Room 237, because I think it comes together a little bit more cohesively. But with the glitch in the Matrix, like I think he's trying to go back to this Room 237 approach, where he's just letting the subjects talk about how they feel about simulation theory. But the problem with that is that he's primarily allowing subjects that are not really like studied in it or well versed in it. It's a type of subjects where it's like Rodney found like that weird dude in his basement who's like middle aged, he's 45,
yes, exactly.
And he's smoking a bong and he's eating Cheetos. Like, oh, okay, like I was listening to Elon Musk and he was talking about, and it's like that type of intellectual theory. And I think those subjects are fun because he seems to have kind of a playfulness in terms of like not fully taking them seriously at times, or like kind of like acknowledging that they're kind of full of it. One key example is they're talking about Minecraft, and one of the subjects is this like the higher intellectual being or something. Like he used some phrase like that, and the camera zooms in on like a kid with a headset playing Minecraft, and it's such like I kind of wish the movie had more of that, because it's like, if it's willing to acknowledge that some of these people are just kind of like in their own heads and like not really connected to reality, that would have been a little bit more interesting if it had been with some more of the like kind of theological or philosophical subjects that are kind of briefly talked to throughout, but not really given a lot of time to share their thoughts comparatively. I think that would have been a little bit more well-rounded, interesting documentary. But as it is right here, it's mostly about kind of establishing a mood and like kind of getting you into a similar headspace of these kind of aloof personalities, which in my opinion, some of them are entertaining, some of them are kind of interesting, and one of them in particular is just like pretty haunting towards the end. But for the most part, I just don't find them as interesting as the fan theories that are established in The Shining, who, I mean, those people are primarily full of shit themselves, but I mean, at least those are entertaining in terms of like what they're saying. I just don't really find the subjects in A Glitch in the Matrix to be as entertaining or endearing in a similar fashion. I think most of them are mildly amusing, or they have some interesting concepts, but like you said, it's all fairly surface level, and it just kind of feels like Reddit commenters just offering their brief thoughts on things, to the point where as a documentary it does kind of test your patience after a while.
Right, like have you ever like been in that situation where you're in like a college dorm and this person who just read like 3 chapters of a book like tries to come off like an expert on it and just sits there talking your ear off about it and just trying to convince you like how fascinating it is? And it's like, dude, like, yeah, I know what this is. Like,
and another thing about Infinite Jest.
Exactly. Yes, no, exactly. But like, I don't know. It's just like this pedantic, it's just super weird to me. And it's a shame because their creative flourishes. I think Asher's just so good at making documentaries entertaining. Like the archival footage is really good. I just thought that like the selection of things tying in the Matrix without it being too much the Matrix was good. Like there's a good balance of that. And also, like, I think it's fun that, like you said, they don't take the subjects too seriously, which works to the film's favor, unfortunately, when they just do these things like where they're like CG characters and things like that.
Yeah, avatars.
It's fun. It's fun,
yeah.
But then it doesn't go anywhere. So you're like, what? Why did I just sit through this?
Yeah, I mean, I think if people have no idea of what simulation theory is and they go into this documentary with an open perspective, I think that might play better, or you might get a little bit more out of this. But I feel like especially now with the internet, and we have this kind of like red pill, blue pill culture where these conversations are so indoctored into online culture and online forums that I don't think there's a lot of information here that's new to the layman. And
Right.
I think to anyone who's interested in simulation theory, this is always going to be like, one-on-one stuff, and I don't think they're going to get anything outside of the personalities being kind of amusing at times. So I'm not really sure who this movie is appealing to, like maybe like older audiences who aren't online and they're just kind of getting like a rough course in like what these people are saying. But like we were saying, like I think the balance isn't quite there in terms of indulging the subjects, but also kind of being reserved enough to be acknowledging that they're kind of full of it and just not really speaking a lot of honest sense. But I think that balance was a lot more coherent in the last two films that he did, or at least Room 237. But
Yeah.
with this one, it just I mean, it's not a bad film. I think it's like decently well made, and I agree with you. Like I think the fact that it was filmed during COVID, presumably, and that's primarily following Zoom conversations that have this flourish of being like CG avatars and stuff like that. I think that's a creative way of getting around something that could have been visually boring otherwise. But
Yeah, it's not flat.
yeah, which I think that's a credit to him being a well-versed documentarian at this point. But like you said, like I just compared to his past few films, this one just left me a little bit wanting by the end.
Yeah, I think to answer your question of like who is this for, I think this is supposed to be primarily for millennials, like younger millennials, or maybe middle millennials and boomers. And so like for millennials, it's like for those of us who maybe like we were aware of the Matrix, like we probably like snuck into it, because Gen X, I think this is not for Gen X. Like, because they lived through, like, they watched The Matrix, like, fully formed, and, like, I feel like that part of, like, the subculture in the early 2000s is, like, well aware of all this material. And a lot of them are, like, the Redditors you're talking about, the people who've, like, gone on, like, I think even Gen Z, like, it's not for them. Like you said, it's, like, I feel like we could invite a Gen Z person on and they'd be like, all right, I'm going to bread pill both of you. Like, they know this stuff. It's not... I think it's like millennials who maybe are like a little bit less tech savvy, and boomers who kind of just like this stuff kind of maybe went over their head and they never really considered it before.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I think if you're interested in simulation theory, you're not really going to get that much out of this film. And if you don't know that much about simulation theory, you're not going to learn a whole lot. So in that respect, it doesn't really amount to a whole bunch of, other than like maybe like a brief intro into this like really complicated, nuanced conversation that I think, like you say, if you go on enough online forums, you'll probably get more out of that conversation than you would with this film. But in terms of being like a flashy, entertaining package, it's okay. Like I think it's amusing in spots, and I don't think it's poorly made in any respect. But in the end, I think as a like kind of more intellectually stimulating piece of entertainment, I don't think it really fully amounts to all that much.
Agreed. Yeah, it's just pretty average. So that is Glitch in the Matrix. I am, like a C plus. Like you said, it's not terrible or anything. I just think that it's not something a lot of people are going to get too much out of. But what about you? It sounds like you're around like C plus, maybe B minus.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I've been back and forth on my grade. I think I'll give it a high C plus, just because I don't imagine I'm going to be reflecting on this film in the same way that I thought about his last two films.
Yeah, same.
And I think there was just a little bit more to those films than what we got here. But I mean, not a terrible film. Like I'm not mad I saw it or anything. I think enough of it is interesting, and I do think the one scene, I think it's kind of an ethical boundary in terms of whether or not they should have included that. But the whole scene with the house, I don't know what I can really say without spoiling it, but you know what I'm talking about, like 3/4 away. That's such a haunting and just a visceral scene that I'm really impressed with how they pulled that off, even though I think there might be some ethical issues there. But I think that's enough to where like I can see that's the Rodney Asher I know. Like that's the filmmaker I'm used to from the past two films, and I just don't think that fully came out here. But not a worthless effort, just something that didn't match its potential.
All right. Well, if you want to check it out for yourself and let us know what you think, Glitch in the Matrix is available to stream right now on demand. It is 110 minutes long. We have one last film to talk about this week, And it's one that kind of snuck up on us. I don't know if I would have catched this, except I started seeing some really good notices coming out for it. I was only like vaguely aware of it. And then, Will, you mentioned that, hey, this might actually be worth checking out. And that is Little Fish, which is a sci-fi romantic drama. It's directed by Chad Hartigan. Have you seen anything from Chad Hartigan before? I'm not as familiar with him myself.
He did Morris from America, right?
Did he? Okay.
I think. I'm familiar with that film. I didn't see it. I know that was at Sundance a few years ago, and it got a warm response. But
just checked. You are correct. Morris from America in 2016. He also made This Is Martin Bonner, and Luke and Brie are on a first date. So yeah, he's made a few films. I haven't seen any of these though, so I'm not as this is a new film for me in the Chad Hartigan filmography.
I mean, I'm not as familiar with the other two films you mentioned, but just based on what I can perceive, that he sounds like a very Sundancey filmmaker. I'm kind of surprised this film was not in the 2021 Sundance Film Festival, but nevertheless, it is kind of fitting that we're watching it so shortly thereafter.
I'm surprised it's not like a Netflix film. This is IFC Films, but I was thinking of The Discovery while I was watching this, the Jason Segel film, a lot. Just kind of like the moodiness and the sort of like bleakness of the plot, which let's get into. So this film stars Olivia Cooke and Jack O'Connell as a couple that is, we start the movie like where they first meet and a romance is blossoming, but in the backdrop of their burgeoning love story is a pandemic, which is unique. It's people are getting something called NIA, I think it is, where for unexplained reasons, people are developing acute memory loss. And it's essentially a form of dementia that people are sort of getting seemingly at random. And there's no discernible cure. It can come at any time. And the film is kind of haunting. It's a very disturbing thought experiment. Just this idea that like people are like in this movie going around and then someone will be like, wait, I honestly don't know who you are. And it's pretty freaky. They really like set the stage with that whole aspect of the premise. And along the way, these two people are trying to hold on to each other. Jack O'Connell's character is named Jude, and he is slowly losing his memory. Some people lose it all at once. Other people like him, it just sort of fades away slowly over time. The film kind of interestingly tackles the different ways people respond to dementia. Some people get violent when they can't remember things. Other people are just a little bit more of like, oh yeah, I don't know who you are. So, and then just kind of like move along. And so kind of a sad film in a lot of ways. It's definitely one that I found myself. Yeah, it's pretty depressing.
Yeah.
And obviously like very, interestingly timed. The filmmakers made this right before the pandemic, so it was not, this was not filmed. I think this was filmed like a year before COVID was even a thing. So it's kind of incidental timing there. But yeah, that's kind of the setup. What do you think of this one, Washington?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, like I'd heard all this high praise before. I think it has like a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes right now. So I came in with some expectations of this, and when it started out, I wasn't digging it. Like the opening 10 or so minutes, I was like, this just seems like your average indie dramedy kind of thing. Like it just, like the performers are nice. It's a little weird to see, like you're mentioning off the air, Jack O'Connell doing an American accent, and Olivia Cooke doing a British accent, but.
Hey, Cinemaholics, this is awkward. So I am inserting this after the recording because Will and I, you're not going to believe this, we made a mistake. That's true. It happens, once every couple of decades. So Will and myself thought that Olivia Cooke was doing a British accent in this movie and is an American. It's not true. Olivia Cooke is actually British. Obviously, we're embarrassed. We have considered leaving the podcasting business forever. We're still working that out. Updates to come. But for now, just wanted to insert this just to let you know, so you don't tell all your friends that Olivia Cooke is an American. I hope the damage hasn't already been done. So back to the show. Is it even British too? Because it's like. It kind of is like British Irish a little bit.
Yeah,
I was very confused.
It fluctuated a lot. Neither of their accents are particularly strong. Jack O'Connell keeps going into like his real accent here and there, and then Olivia Cooke is having a little bit of trouble as well. But neither are like completely distracting. Like I thought, I'm
fine with it with O'Connell because it just gives me Skins flashbacks, which I want.
That's fair. But yeah, I mean, I think when it started out, I was like, like there's like they're trying to do like the evocative like Terrence Malick type, like like montage type stuff, and I was just like, I don't know, this just seems like your kind of traditional romantic dramedy indie type thing, and
Will's heart was stone, and it hardened even further as the film progressed.
But as the premise went along, I was kind of surprised like how much I was getting endeared to. I think its pacing is a little slack. Like I don't think like it gets kind of so wrapped up in the concept. I think there are moments where I think it almost feels maybe a little like too bleak because it's so caught up in the sadness of the premise that the story doesn't really progress much. But I do have to commend the film for having the patience that it does and allowing itself to have kind of complicated and contemplative conversations about like something like this that it is very serious, and it does like fit to what we're dealing with right now in some respect, and I do think the two main performers are doing a nice job of keeping it grounded and finding the authenticity here, and by and large I liked it. I didn't love it the way some people are, but I was more endeared to this than I anticipated by the end.
Yeah, I didn't love it either. I think we're kind of on the same wavelength this episode, which it's a welcome departure from the knives that were out during our Sundance conversation. So I'm good with that. But yeah, so I didn't mention this before, but this film is based on a short story by Aja.
Oh, that makes sense.
Aja Gabel, I think, something like that. And it feels a lot like that. It feels a lot like a kind of thin, plot, even though the story itself there's a lot going on. And also, Mattson Tomlin does the screenplay. And from what I can tell, it seems like a pretty good adapted screenplay. I think they were able to take a short story and kind of stretch it in a way that's not like noticeably stretched. Like, I mean, maybe you might notice it, but it definitely didn't bother me. It felt like this film was kind of going its natural progression.
Yeah, I agree.
My thing with it, what kind of kept me from loving it is that there just weren't any surprises, I guess. You kind of know what's going to happen. I mean, you see everything kind of play out the way you expect it. Even the little things that they're kind of teasing out, they kind of spoil themselves on like some things that maybe some people might. I mean, I think both of us probably would have caught what was going to happen by the very end, but I think anybody can catch it just because they sort of give it away. They're like, like if you're just paying attention, you can be like, wait a minute. And then, this is how the movie's going to end. And for me, that robbed it of all tension because I was just like, all right, well, okay. Like, I don't know. I guess it didn't affect me for that reason because I wasn't at the edge of my seat at all. I wasn't like, and I wasn't that invested, I guess, in like what was going on throughout because it just felt like they were sort of, going back and forth on how they feel about the situation, but it's just the situation never really changed. There were no turns. There's just no energy, I think, to the story. It just kind of goes downhill, and that's just kind of it. And it's good along the way for sure, and it's well executed. And I think Olivia Cooke and Jack O'Connell, my goodness, are just first of all really great actors, and I think that they both are just really electric to watch together. I think they have a really good, they have really good chemistry. I think I really bought their love story. I liked those crazy kids, and me, I'm a big fan of Olivia Cooke, and I think it's hard for me sometimes to watch Olivia Cooke in things because I just think of her character from Thoroughbreds, and I'm like, you're secretly sociopathic. Don't even lie to us right now. But in this movie, I didn't think about that the whole time. So there you go. But I did like it. I did enjoy it.
Yeah, no, like I said before, I think their talents in terms of developing these characters to feel pretty fleshed out and authentic in their relationship. Not to say that the screenplay doesn't do that, but I do think they go a good while to making you believe into this relationship and make you feel endeared to it and ultimately sympathetic towards it. But I have to agree. I think maybe this is the rare time where I think maybe if they didn't focus so much on the two characters but kind of fleshed out the world itself a little bit more, I would have been kind of more immersed in it, because it feels like...
Surprised to hear that from you, Elashton.
Yeah, because I think we outside of our lead characters, we only really see another couple that's their friends. Like, we see them briefly, and then we kind of hear from their mom, and then we occasionally throughout we'll see different personalities, but we don't really fully get the full story of this world. Like, I felt like a lot of it was a lot of stuff was happening off camera that would have been interesting to see, or a little bit more interesting to know about. That we see like hints of it here and there, and I think some of that would have been investing to know, but maybe that's just me. I don't know if you feel that way, John, or not.
I do. I think that it was kind of unbalanced in how the world itself was reacting to things, because a part of the film, it's like the world is just sort of like, well, like John Mulaney, it's like, this might as well happen. But then other parts of the film, it's like chaos. So it's like, which is it? And I guess part of me, I'm going back and forth a little bit, because I'm like, well, I guess that does kind of match what happened with COVID, because it was in waves of like people just sort of accepting it, but then it would get really bad, and then people would be like, actually, this is terrible, and then it would go back to like, we were overreacting. It kind of reminded me of that. It also kind of reminded me in the way with like COVID, how, I just think that there's a certain line in this movie. It's like, how are you supposed to grieve that everything when everyone is going through the same thing? And that kind of hit me, It's like it does kind of directly tie to like what we've been going through. It's like we're all going through this. So it's like, how are we supposed to like reckon with how we feel about it? Because like so many other people are in totally worse situations, and it's really hard. And I think this movie incidentally tackles it. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing I was kind of wrestling with while I was watching, is it better or worse that this is coming out now? Like, it's better in the sense like stuff like that stands out more because there is a thorough line to what everyone's dealing with, but at the same time, like you can't not think of COVID when you're watching this movie. Like, it's just impossible to separate the two. So like, does that rob the movie of its own, world building? Like we were saying, like, are we connecting too much with our lives to the point where we can't really look at this as its own thing? And I don't really know. Like, I think that's going to have to vary for each audience member. Like, I think some people are going to be able to, look at this movie for what it is and be a little bit more taken by it because of what's happening in reality, or they're going to be more taken out of it because they have to constantly associate it with what's going on in the current pandemic. Like we said, not that it's unfair to compare the two, because it's not, it wasn't made with that intention, but at the same time, like, they are releasing it now, so they have to be aware of it. I think I even got an email from one of the people that were marketing that said like a pandemic movie made before COVID or something like that. So it's like, I think they're aware of this. They have to be at this point. And I don't know how I feel about that, but yeah, I mean, I think, like we were saying, like, I think by and large it works. Like, I think there's some things that could have been a little bit more fleshed out. I think there's some things that I would have liked to have known a little bit about this world to make it feel a little bit more enriched. But I think, like I said, like the core relationship is what works, and that's the focus here. And if that works, then the movie works. And yeah, I was taken by it by the end.
I think it kind of reminds me. It makes me think about how many films we're going to get like this year, because it was like this at Sundance. There were so many like films that were incidentally about COVID and purposely about COVID, and like, I'm sure our listeners are so sick of it. They're just like why does, like, I watch movies to get away from this subject, and like, even in this episode, it's like we can't escape it, between like Life in a Day we were talking about, and then we were talking about Malcolm and Marie, and it's like, it's just so intertwined in our lives.
Even Glitch in the Matrix.
Is it?
Yeah, because it was filmed during COVID.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, but we didn't have to dwell too much on that. We just kind of mentioned it, but like, I don't know. I feel like it informed so much of our conversations in those other films. You know what I mean?
No, I agree.
I guess, like, I don't know. I feel for you listeners. I'm sorry that it keeps getting brought up. It's just,
well, it's not our fault.
It's not our fault. Yeah, it's just so hard to separate the topic, and I'm conflicted because, yeah, I mean, art is just reflective, and it's reflecting a very pervasive moment in our lives, and to not mention it would be doing a disservice, to like what this thing is about and what you would experience watching it, and we don't want to make you think that it's like, this like totally removed from like how we're feeling about certain things. So then you end up watching it and be like, why didn't they even bring that up? They're terrible at their jobs.
Well, I mean, art is reflective of the times. And like I said, I mean, the fact they're releasing it now, they have to know that this is going to be directly referencing COVID. So it's like, I don't feel guilty for referencing it or calling back to it. But in terms of me being a film critic, like I wonder if it's doing a disservice to looking the film objectively by bringing so much of COVID baggage into it. But I don't know. I can only look at the film the way I look at it now. So I maybe later on I'll have a different opinion, but that's the way it is. Yeah.
I mean, that speaks exactly, I think, to what you were saying before of like, well, would we be reacting to this movie differently? Would we be liking it more or disliking it if if this had come out in 2019? And I'm conflicted on that because on one hand, I want to believe that I would actually like it a lot more because I would be able to just sort of appreciate it without thinking about, these like depressing life events. Instead, that's kind of like intertwined with this, and you can't really just sit with the film and reckon with it. We have to keep comparing it to other things, which I think can be just a little reductive sometimes to like what the author was intending. I wonder what it was like reading that short story, all those years ago when it came out or whenever. So all that said, definitely a good watch. I think people will get a lot out of this. I'm kind of sad that it's not on a streaming service, so it'd be kind of tough for people to see it. But I liked it a good bit. I'm a solid B on Little Fish. Low B, actually. It was kind of close to B minus, and I'm still kind of reconciling some things with it that kind of let me down. But it's the kind of movie where I think it could have been fantastic. I was really, part of this movie, not in the first bit, but like maybe like around the beginning of the second act, I was like, man, this is really good. This could be like B plus, A minus.
Yeah, I'm not too far from where you are though. I was between a low B and a high B minus, and I think I'll also give it the low B, just because, like we said, I think what works is really appealing, and I was taken by it, and like I said, the ending, you can see where it's going, but I was still affected by it. I think it's a sweet movie by and large, and even though it is melancholic and it's by design, like I think what it's able to achieve in terms of setting a mood and getting us into perspective of the characters is effective. Now, how much of that is related to COVID, like we said, that's a whole other discussion, but nevertheless, I think it works, and I think, like you said, I think people are going to be taken by it, even if it is a little depressing by design. But I am curious to see what the broader response is. Obviously, a lot of critics are enjoying it and are getting a lot out of it, but I think by and large fans will too. So this is a good one.
All right. Well, you can you can rent or buy Little Fish on demand right now on all the normal video on demand services. It's only 100 minutes, one of the shortest films we've talked about this week. And I hope people like it. I hope people are able to enjoy it to some degree. And especially I hope that this is the return of Olivia Cooke, and Jack O'Connell. I feel like both of them have sort of been a little bit more obscured lately. I think with Olivia Cooke since like Life Itself, Jack O'Connell since I guess Unbroken. We haven't seen that much of them, have we?
Not that I can recall. Yeah, I mean, I guess like what was that? Money Monster was 2016 as well with Jack O'Connell. So yeah, it's been a bit since I've seen him in something.
I think that was 2015 maybe. Feels a long time ago.
Actually, I didn't even see Money Monster. I just remember seeing the ads.
Oh, I did. That was okay.
It was okay.
It was a decent like George Clooney, thing. But yeah, I think Olivia Cooke though she was in that Vanity Fair thing, the miniseries. So she's been busy.
I don't know what that is, but yeah. I mean, the main thing I remember her from most recently was Ready Player One, which was a couple years ago.
Yeah. But she is fantastic. She's an indie darling, and I think like there's been like an effort to maybe like with Ready Player One to sort of like and Life Itself to like bring her to like a more mainstream Hollywood machine kind of thing, and I don't think that's what is happening. But if it means that we get movies like this with her, I'm a much bigger fan of that arrangement myself. But yeah.
Would it surprise you to note there's some movie out there with her and Christopher Abbott that I haven't seen, but I know exists, and it seems like that's appealing to us, but
there you go.
We haven't seen it, but yeah, she's been doing a lot, and I think she's doing a lot of good stuff, but yeah, it seems like she's one rule away from being like a breakout, but I think I agree with you that the smaller stuff she's doing now is a little bit more interesting anyway, so
at least for the time being.
Yeah.
All right, well, that'll do it for this episode of Cinemaholics. Speaking of, our big break, Will, this could be it. This could be the one that's gets us to the stratosphere. Who knows?
I don't know.
Thank you, of course, for listening to the show. We'll be back next week, hopefully with Abby Olcese returning.
Yeah.
And I forget what comes out next week. I'm so tired from all the Sundance stuff. I forget, but I'm sure we'll
Is it Minari?
It could be. I have it all mixed up, like all the February films. I know a lot of them. It's like Minari, Nomadland. They're kind of spread out. But whatever the case, we will be back to discuss the big films of the week. And I think that's all we got. I think that's the end of the show.
That'll do it. Yeah, I think so.
We'll see you all from next week from the Internet, California. I am John Agroni.
And for the Internet, Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
See you next time.